The iron shackles bit into Violet Greene's wrists as she stumbled forward onto the wooden platform, her knees threatening to buckle beneath her weight, while the August sun beat mercilessly down on North Platte, Nebraska, in the summer of 1878. The crowd gathered below her murmured and pointed, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disgust, as the auctioneer raised his voice above the din of the afternoon heat. She had never imagined her life would come to this moment, standing in chains before strangers who would bid on her future, like she was nothing more than livestock. Here we have Violet Greene, convicted of horse theft from the Donnelly Ranch, the auctioneer bellowed, his handlebar mustache twitching as he spoke. Fine young woman of 20 years, healthy and strong. She will work off her debt to society through indentured servitude. The bidding starts at $50. Violet kept her eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the crowd, refusing to look at the faces staring up at her. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry, even though tears burned behind her eyes. The crime she had been convicted of was one she did not commit, but no one had believed her when she swore her innocence. Her word meant nothing against the testimony of Thomas Donnelly, the richest rancher in 3 counties. He had wanted her land, the small parcel her parents had left her before the fever took them both last winter, and when she refused to sell, he had found another way to take it from her. The crowd remained silent. $50 was a steep price for an indentured servant, even one as young as Violet. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her shoulders, heavier than the chains that bound her wrists. The auctioneer frowned and was about to lower the starting bid when a voice rang out from the back of the crowd. $50. Heads turned to see who had spoken. Violet dared to lift her gaze and saw a tall man pushing his way through the gathered townspeople. He wore dusty riding clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face, but even from this distance, she could see the determined set of his jaw. He moved with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly what he was doing and would not be swayed from his purpose. "We have $50 from the gentleman in the back," the auctioneer said, his voice regaining some enthusiasm. "Do I hear 60? The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Most people in North Platte knew better than to bid against Thomas Donnelly's interests, and everyone assumed he would want to ensure Violet ended up working for someone who would make her life miserable as punishment for daring to defy him. But the stranger did not look like someone who concerned himself with the politics of small-town ranchers. $60, another voice called out. Violet recognized it immediately. Frank Morrison, one of Donnelly's hired men, stood near the front of the crowd with his arms crossed over his barrel chest. The stranger did not hesitate. $75. $80, Frank countered. $100. The stranger's voice was calm, almost bored, as if he was discussing the weather rather than bidding on a human being's servitude. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. $100 was more than most men in North Platte earned in 3 months. Frank Morrison looked uncertain, glancing around as if hoping Donnelly himself would appear to tell him what to do. When no instruction came, he shook his head and stepped back into the crowd. $100, going once, going twice, sold. The auctioneer brought his gavel down with a sharp crack that made Violet flinch. The young lady goes to the gentleman in the back. The stranger climbed the steps to the platform, and for the first time, Violet got a clear look at her new owner. He was perhaps 28 years old, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that fell just past his collar. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and serious, but not unkind. He had a strong face, all sharp angles and hard lines, with a nose that looked like it had been broken at least once and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. This was not a man who had lived an easy life. "Name is Barrett Callahan," he said quietly, holding her gaze. "I will take those chains off her now." The sheriff, who had been standing to the side of the platform, stepped forward with the key. "She is your responsibility now, Callahan. If she runs or causes trouble, it is on your head." "She will not run." Barrett said it with such certainty that even Violet almost believed him, though she had no idea why this stranger had faith in her. The sheriff unlocked the shackles, and Violet gasped as the metal fell away from her raw, bleeding wrists. She had been wearing those chains for 3 days, ever since the judge had sentenced her. Barrett pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and carefully wrapped it around her left wrist, then used another to bind her right. His hands were gentle, his touch careful not to cause her more pain. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes," she managed to whisper, though her voice cracked from disuse and emotion. He nodded and gestured for her to follow him down the steps. The crowd parted as they walked through, and Violet could feel their eyes boring into her back. She heard the whispers starting already, speculation about who this Barrett Callahan was and what he wanted with a convicted horse thief. She kept her chin up and her shoulders back, determined not to show weakness even though she felt like she might collapse at any moment. Barrett led her to where his horse was tied outside the general store, a magnificent bay stallion with intelligent eyes and a glossy coat. He untied the reins and then surprised her by offering her his canteen. "Drink. You look like you have not had water in hours." She took it with trembling hands and drank deeply, the lukewarm water tasting better than anything she had ever consumed. When she finished, she handed it back to him. "Thank you. We have a ride ahead of us. My ranch is about 10 miles north of town. Can you ride?" "Yes, I can ride." He swung up into the saddle and then reached down to pull her up behind him. Violet hesitated for only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was strong and sure as he lifted her as if she weighed nothing. She settled behind him on the horse, unsure where to put her hands until he reached back and pulled her arms around his waist. "Hold on tight. Thunder here likes to run." They left North Platte at a steady canter, the afternoon sun beating down on them as they rode north across the open prairie. Violet pressed her cheek against Barrett's back, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing and the warmth of his body through his shirt. She had so many questions she wanted to ask, but she was afraid to break the silence. Why had he bought her servitude? What did he expect from her? Would he be cruel like she had heard some masters were to their indentured servants? The landscape rolled past in waves of golden grass that bent beneath the prairie wind. Occasionally, they passed small homesteads or clusters of cattle, but mostly the land was empty and wild, stretching endlessly toward a horizon that seemed to retreat as fast as they approached. Violet had lived in North Platte her entire life, but she had never traveled this far north. The openness of it all made her feel small and insignificant, just another speck in the vast wilderness. After nearly 2 hours of riding, Barrett slowed Thunder to a walk as they crested a low hill. Below them, nestled in a valley beside a creek lined with cottonwood trees, sat a ranch house and several outbuildings. It was not a grand estate like Donnelly's spread, but it looked well-maintained and prosperous. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and Violet could see chickens pecking in the yard and horses in a corral near the barn. "This is home," Barrett said. "The Broken Creek Ranch. It is not much, but it is mine." "It looks like a fine place," Violet said honestly. Compared to the cramped room above the milliner's shop where she had been living before her arrest, this ranch looked like paradise. They rode down the hill and into the yard. A man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants as he approached. He was older than Barrett, perhaps in his 50s, with graying hair and a weather-beaten face that spoke of decades spent working outdoors. "Barrett, you are back," the man said, then noticed Violet behind him. His eyes widened slightly, but he did not comment. "Henry, this is Violet Greene. She will be staying with us. Violet, this is Henry Porter. He has been working this ranch since before I bought it." Henry touched the brim of his hat. "Madam." Violet nodded in acknowledgement, still uncertain of her place in all this. Barrett dismounted and then helped Violet down. Her legs were shaky from the long ride and she stumbled slightly. Barrett steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Henry, would you see to Thunder? I need to get Miss Greene settled." "Of course." Henry took the reins and led the horse toward the barn, glancing back over his shoulder with undisguised curiosity. Barrett guided Violet toward the house. "You must be hungry. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning. They gave us bread and water in the jail." His jaw tightened. "Come inside." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall and a sturdy wooden table surrounded by chairs in the center. Dishes were stacked neatly on shelves and herbs hung drying from the ceiling beams. Everything was clean and orderly, which surprised Violet. She had expected a bachelor's home to be rough and untidy. "Sit," Barrett said, pulling out a chair at the table. "I will make you something to eat." Violet sat, watching as he moved efficiently around the kitchen. He sliced bread and cheese, then pulled out cold roasted chicken from the icebox and arranged everything on a plate. He set it in front of her along with a glass of milk, then sat down across from her. "Eat," he said gently. "We can talk after." Violet did not need to be told twice. She ate slowly, trying to maintain some dignity despite her ravenous hunger. The food was simple but delicious, and she could feel strength returning to her body with each bite. Barrett watched her quietly, his expression unreadable. When she finally finished, she set down her fork and met his eyes. "Why did you buy my servitude?" "Because I do not believe you stole those horses." His answer shocked her into silence. After a long moment, she found her voice. "How could you possibly know that? You do not know me." "I know Thomas Donnelly. I know what kind of man he is." Barrett leaned back in his chair. 6 years ago, when I first came to Nebraska, I worked as a hand on his ranch. I saw how he operated, how he took what he wanted and destroyed anyone who stood in his way. When I saved up enough to buy this place, he tried to run me off. Sent men to burn my barn, to scatter my cattle, to make my life hell. But I am stubborn and I do not scare easy. Eventually, he gave up and left me alone. "So you bought me to spite him?" "No." Barrett shook his head firmly. "I bought you because what was happening to you was wrong, and I had the means to stop it. That is all." Violet felt tears welling up again, but this time she could not stop them. They spilled down her cheeks as the reality of her situation finally hit her. This man, this stranger, had spent $100 to save her from a fate she could not even bear to imagine. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed, her shoulders shaking with the force of her emotion. She heard Barrett's chair scrape against the floor, and then he was kneeling beside her. He did not touch her, but his presence was comforting. "You are safe here, Violet. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I give you my word that I will not harm you. You will work to repay your debt to society, but I will treat you fairly and with respect." "I did not steal those horses," she said through her tears. "I swear on my parents' graves I did not do it. I believe you." Those 3 words, spoken with such simple conviction, broke something open inside Violet's chest. She lowered her hands and looked at Barrett through her tears. His gray eyes were steady and kind, and in that moment she made a choice to trust him. "Thank you," she whispered. He stood and moved back to his chair, giving her space to compose herself. "You must be exhausted. Let me show you where you will sleep, and then you can rest. Tomorrow will be soon enough to discuss what your duties will be." He led her down a short hallway to a small bedroom. It contained a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a chest of drawers, and a washstand with a basin and pitcher. A window looked out over the creek and the cottonwood trees beyond. It was simple but clean and far nicer than anywhere Violet had slept in months. "This was meant to be a guest room, but we do not get many visitors out here," Barrett explained. "It is yours now. There is water in the pitcher and clean linens in the chest. If you need anything, my room is just down the hall. This is more than I expected. Thank you." He nodded and turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Violet, forgiveness starts now. Whatever happened in the past, whatever people think you did, it does not matter here. You have a fresh start if you want it." Before she could respond, he was gone, closing the door softly behind him. Violet stood in the middle of the room, his words echoing in her mind. Forgiveness starts now. She had been carrying so much anger and bitterness since her arrest, so much rage at the injustice of her situation. But maybe Barrett was right. Maybe this could be a new beginning. She washed her face and hands in the basin, hissing as the water stung her raw wrists. The handkerchiefs Barrett had wrapped around them were stained with blood. She should find proper bandages, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a heavy weight. She lay down on the bed, still fully clothed, and pulled the quilt over herself. Within minutes, she was asleep. She woke to golden afternoon light streaming through the window and the sound of men's voices outside. For a moment, she was disoriented, unsure of where she was. Then memory came flooding back, and she sat up quickly. How long had she slept? She looked out the window and saw that the sun was low on the horizon. She must have slept for hours. Violet stood and straightened her clothes as best she could. She was still wearing the same dress she had been arrested in, now wrinkled and stained. She desperately wanted a bath and clean clothes, but she had no idea what the protocol was in this situation. Was she supposed to ask permission for such things? She was technically Barrett's servant now, bound to him until her debt was paid. She found him in the barn, brushing down a chestnut mare. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening when he saw her. "You are awake. Did you rest well?" "Yes, thank you. I apologize for sleeping so long." "I should have been working. You needed rest more than I needed work from you." He continued, brushing the mare with long, even strokes. "How are your wrists? They hurt, but they will heal. Come here." He set down the brush and walked to a cabinet in the corner of the barn. He returned with a small tin of salve. "Give me your hands." Violet held out her hands and Barrett carefully unwrapped the stained handkerchiefs. He made a soft sound of dismay when he saw the raw, angry wounds beneath. Gently, he applied the salve, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender. "This should help. I will get you proper bandages from the house." He wrapped the handkerchiefs back around her wrists, looser this time. "Violet, I want to make something clear. You are not a slave here. Yes, legally you are indentured to me, but I do not intend to treat you as property. You will work, but so do I and Henry. We all contribute to keeping this ranch running. You will eat the same food we eat, and you will be treated with respect. Is that understood?" "Yes," she said quietly. "What would you have me do? Can you cook?" "Yes, my mother taught me." "Good." "Our cooking leaves much to be desired. Henry burns everything, and I am not much better. If you could handle meals, that would be a great help. There is also washing and mending to be done, and the vegetable garden needs tending. We had a woman from town coming out once a week to help with such things, but she stopped coming after her husband forbade it, said it was not proper for her to be alone with two unmarried men." "I can do all of that," Violet said. "And if you need help with other things, I can ride and rope. My father taught me before he died. Barrett looked surprised. That would be useful during roundup, but let us start with the household tasks. Speaking of which, you need proper clothes. That dress has seen better days. Violet looked down at herself, embarrassed. I do not have anything else. They took my belongings when I was arrested. I thought as much. There is a trunk in the house with some women's things. They belonged to my mother. She passed 5 years ago, but I kept her clothes. You are about her size, I think. You are welcome to them. The offer touched Violet deeply. Are you certain? Those must hold memories for you. She would want them to be used rather than sitting in a trunk collecting dust. She was a practical woman. He smiled slightly, the first real smile Violet had seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. Come, I will show you. They walked back to the house together. The trunk was in Barrett's room, a large cedar chest at the foot of his bed. He opened it and began pulling out dresses, skirts, and blouses. There were also undergarments, nightgowns, and even a warm wool coat. Take whatever you need, he said. There is a tub in the washroom if you want to bathe. I will heat water for you. You do not have to do that. I know, but I am going to anyway. He carried the clothes to her room and then set about heating water on the stove. While he worked, Violet sorted through the garments, selecting a few practical pieces. Barrett's mother had good taste, and the clothes were well made if a bit old-fashioned. When the water was ready, Barrett filled the tub in the small washroom and left her to her privacy. Violet sank into the warm water with a sigh of pure bliss. She scrubbed away days of grime and fear, washing her hair twice to get it clean. When she finally emerged, pink and pruned, she felt more human than she had in weeks. She dressed in a simple blue calico dress that fit reasonably well, though it was slightly loose in the waist. She brushed out her long dark hair and braided it, then ventured back into the main room. Barrett and Henry were sitting at the table, and both men stood when she entered. You look much better, Barrett said. Henry brought stew from town. I hope you are hungry. They sat down to eat together, and Violet found herself relaxing in the easy conversation between Barrett and Henry. They talked about ranch business, horses that needed shoeing, fence that needed mending, and the price of cattle in Omaha. They included her in the conversation, asking her opinion and actually listening when she spoke. It was such a stark contrast to her treatment over the past weeks that Violet felt herself tearing up again. Are you all right? Barrett asked, concern evident in his voice. Yes, I am just not accustomed to kindness anymore. Henry cleared his throat. Well, you will find plenty of it here, Miss Greene. Barrett is one of the good ones, even if he is too stubborn for his own good sometimes. Says the man who once refused to come in from a blizzard because he wanted to finish repairing the corral, Barrett shot back, but there was affection in his tone. After dinner, Henry excused himself to his quarters above the barn, leaving Violet and Barrett alone. They sat by the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Violet found herself studying Barrett when she thought he was not looking. He was handsome in a rough, weathered way, but it was more than his appearance that drew her attention. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense of integrity that shone through in everything he did. Tell me about your parents, Barrett said suddenly. You mentioned they died last winter. Violet was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. They caught fever during the cold months. First my father, then my mother 3 days later. It happened so fast. 1 week they were healthy and the next they were gone. They left me the land, 20 acres just outside town. It was not much, but it was mine. Thomas Donnelly wanted it because it borders his property and includes water rights to Miller's Creek. He offered to buy it, but the price he offered was insultingly low. I refused, and he did not take it well. So he framed you for horse theft. Yes. His horses went missing one night, and the next morning the sheriff found them in my barn. I have no idea how they got there. I was asleep, and I heard nothing. But Donnelly swore I stole them, and the judge believed him over me. Did you have anyone to speak for you at the trial? No one who mattered. A few friends tried, but their word carried no weight against Donnelly's. And the judge, he is Donnelly's cousin by marriage. I never had a chance. Barrett's jaw clenched. That is not justice. No, it is not, but it is the way of things when you have no money or power. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to embers. Finally, Barrett spoke again. I meant what I said earlier. You have a fresh start here. I cannot undo what happened to you, but I can give you a safe place to rebuild your life. When your servitude is completed, you will leave here with money in your pocket and skills that will help you make your way in the world. Why are you being so kind to me? Violet asked. You do not owe me anything. Maybe not, but I owe it to the man I want to be. He stood and stretched. It is late. We should both get some rest. Tomorrow I will show you around the ranch properly. Violet stood as well. Barrett, thank you for everything, he nodded, and for a moment their eyes met and held. Violet felt something shift in her chest, a flutter of awareness that took her by surprise. She quickly looked away, suddenly flustered. Good night, Violet. Good night. She retreated to her room, closing the door and leaning against it. Her heart was beating faster than normal, and she pressed a hand to her chest as if she could calm it through sheer force of will. She barely knew this man, and yet already she felt drawn to him in a way that both excited and terrified her. She could not afford to develop feelings for Barrett Callahan. He was her master, at least legally, and any relationship beyond that of employer and servant would be complicated at best, dangerous at worst. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she could not stop thinking about the gentle way he had bandaged her wrists, the conviction in his voice when he said he believed her, the kindness in his eyes. Against her better judgment, hope began to bloom in her chest. The next morning, Violet woke before dawn, as was her habit. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, determined to prove her worth. She found the pantry well stocked and set about making breakfast. By the time Barrett emerged from his room, the smell of coffee, bacon, and fresh biscuits filled the house. You did not have to do all this, he said, but she could see he was pleased. You gave me a job, and I intend to do it well. Henry came in from the barn, and the three of them sat down to eat. Both men praised her cooking enthusiastically, and Violet felt a warm glow of satisfaction. It felt good to be useful, to contribute something meaningful. After breakfast, Barrett took her on a tour of the ranch. He showed her the barn where they kept the horses, the chicken coop, the smokehouse, and the root cellar. He introduced her to the cattle that grazed in the pastures and explained his plans for expanding the herd. He clearly loved this land, and his passion was infectious. My father was a farmer in Missouri, he told her as they walked along the creek. He worked himself into an early grave trying to make that rocky soil produce. I swore I would never live like that, always struggling, always just barely getting by. So I left home at 16 and headed west. I worked as a cowhand, a horse breaker, even spent a year riding shotgun on stage coaches. I saved every penny I could, and when I had enough, I bought this place. That was 4 years ago. You have done well for yourself, Violet said, looking around at the thriving ranch. I have been fortunate. And stubborn. Those two things go a long way out here, he glanced at her. What about you? What did you want to do with your life before all this happened? I never really thought about it, Violet admitted. I assumed I would get married eventually, have children, live a quiet life in North Platte. It is what my parents wanted for me. But after they died, I started thinking maybe there could be more. Maybe I could run the land myself, build something of my own. That is why I would not sell to Donnelly. It was not just about the money. It was about proving I could stand on my own 2 feet. And you still can, Barrett said. This situation is temporary. In 3 years, your servitude will be complete, and you will be free to do whatever you choose. 3 years. It sounded like an eternity, and yet no time at all. Violet wondered what would happen when those 3 years were up. Would she leave the Broken Creek Ranch and never look back? The thought left her feeling strangely hollow. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Violet rose early to cook breakfast, then spent her mornings tending the vegetable garden and caring for the chickens. In the afternoons, she did laundry, mending, and cleaning. The work was hard but satisfying, and she found she enjoyed the structure and purpose it gave her days. Barrett and Henry worked from sunup to sundown on ranch tasks, but Barrett always made time to check on Violet, to ask if she needed anything, or if there was work she could not manage. He was never condescending or overbearing, just genuinely concerned for her well-being. Slowly, Violet felt her defensive walls beginning to crumble. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after Violet's arrival, a rider came to the ranch. Violet was in the garden when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. She looked up to see a well-dressed man on a black gelding riding into the yard. Her blood ran cold when she recognized Thomas Donnelly. He was a large man in his 50s, with silver hair and a florid face that spoke of too much rich food and whiskey. He carried himself with the arrogance of someone who was accustomed to getting his way. When he saw Violet in the garden, his lips curved into a cruel smile. "Well, well, so this is where the little horse thief ended up. I must say, Callahan, I did not expect you to be the one to take her off our hands, although perhaps I should have. You always did have a weakness for lost causes." Barrett emerged from the barn, his expression cold. "What do you want, Donnelly?" "Just wanted to see how my investment was doing. After all, those horses she stole were worth a considerable sum. I want to make sure she is working hard to pay back her debt to society." "She works plenty hard, not that it is any of your business." "Oh, but it is my business. I have a vested interest in seeing justice done." Donnelly's eyes raked over Violet in a way that made her skin crawl. "Although I must admit, she cleans up better than I expected." "Tell me, Callahan, is she warming your bed as well as cooking your meals?" Violet felt her face flush hot with humiliation and rage. Barrett's entire body went rigid, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "Get off my land," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Touchy, are we?" "I hit a nerve, did I?" Donnelly laughed. "Well, enjoy her while you can. In 3 years she will be free, and then what? Do you really think a convicted criminal is going to stay out here in the middle of nowhere with you? She will take the first opportunity to run, mark my words." "I said get off my land, now." Something in Barrett's tone must have convinced Donnelly that he had pushed far enough. He tipped his hat mockingly. "I will be going, but I will be keeping an eye on things here, Callahan. You can count on that." He rode off at a leisurely pace, as if to prove he was leaving by choice rather than because he had been ordered to. Violet stood frozen in the garden, her hands trembling. She felt violated by Donnelly's words, by his insinuations, by his very presence on the ranch. Barrett walked over to her, his expression softening when he saw how shaken she was. "Are you all right?" "That man," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "He has taken everything from me, my home, my freedom, my reputation, and he is not satisfied. He wants to see me broken completely." "He will not succeed." Barrett reached out as if to touch her shoulder, then seemed to think better of it and dropped his hand. "I will not let him hurt you anymore, Violet. You have my word." "Why does he hate me so much? I am nobody, just a woman with a small piece of land. Why go to such lengths to destroy me?" Because you said no to him, Barrett said simply. Men like Donnelly cannot stand to be defied. It is not really about the land or the water rights, though those certainly matter to him. It is about power and control. You refuse to bend to his will, and he cannot forgive that. Violet wiped angrily at the tears that were threatening to fall. I hate feeling so powerless. You are not powerless. You are still here, still fighting, still standing. That takes more strength than Donnelly will ever have. His words steadied her. She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. You are right. I will not let him win. I will not let him make me feel ashamed of something I did not do. That is the spirit. Barrett smiled at her, and Violet felt warmth spread through her chest. Now, I believe you are going to make that apple pie you have been threatening us with all week. Threatening? Violet managed a small laugh. I believe I promised you a pie, not threatened you with one. Tomato, tomato, Barrett said, deliberately pronouncing the word the same way both times, and Violet found herself laughing for real this time. The encounter with Donnelly cast a shadow over the next few days, but Violet refused to let it break her spirit. She threw herself into her work with renewed determination. She cooked elaborate meals, scrubbed every inch of the house until it gleamed, and even helped Henry repair the chicken coop when one of the boards came loose. Barrett watched her with something like admiration in his eyes, though he said nothing. But Violet noticed small things. The way he always made sure she had the most comfortable chair by the fire in the evenings. The way he brought her wildflowers from the prairie and left them on the kitchen table without comment. The way his eyes followed her when he thought she was not looking. She noticed because she was doing the same thing. She found herself watching for him, listening for his footsteps, making his favorite foods just to see the pleasure on his face when he tasted them. She treasured their conversations by the fire each evening, when he would tell her stories about his travels or ask her about her childhood. He was easy to talk to, and she found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. One evening, about a month after her arrival at the ranch, a summer storm rolled in. The wind picked up suddenly, and rain began to pour down in sheets. Violet ran out to bring in the laundry she had hung on the line, and Barrett came running from the barn to help her. They were both soaked within seconds, laughing as they gathered the clothes and sprinted for the house. Inside, they stood dripping on the floor, and their eyes met. The laughter died away, replaced by something more intense. Violet was acutely aware of how close they were standing, how Barrett's wet shirt clung to his muscled chest, how water dripped from his hair onto his face. He reached out and gently pushed a strand of wet hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "Violet," he said softly, and there was a question in his eyes. She knew she should step back, should put distance between them, should remember her place. But she did not want to. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. Barrett cupped her face in both hands and leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she did not, he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might disappear. But when Violet kissed him back, threading her fingers through his wet hair, the kiss deepened. It was full of longing and promise, weeks of unspoken attraction finally finding expression. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Barrett rested his forehead against hers. "I should not have done that. I am sorry. You are in my care and I took advantage." "You did not take advantage," Violet said firmly. "I wanted you to kiss me. I have wanted it for weeks." "You have." He sounded almost boyish in his surprise. "Yes, you foolish man. Could you not tell? I thought I was imagining it, seeing what I wanted to see rather than what was really there." He pulled back to look at her properly. "Violet, I need you to know something. I did not buy your servitude to have you for myself. I truly meant to give you a fresh start, nothing more. But somewhere along the way I started to care for you, more than I should, more than is probably wise given the circumstances." "The circumstances," Violet repeated. "You mean the fact that I am legally bound to you for 3 years?" "Yes. I do not want you to feel obligated to return my feelings because of the power I hold over your life. That would be wrong." Violet took his hands in hers. "Barrett, from the moment you wrapped my wrists and told me forgiveness starts now, you gave me back my humanity. You treat me as an equal, not as property. You have never once used your position to coerce or manipulate me. My feelings for you are my own, freely given, not given out of obligation or fear. Do you understand? I want to believe that." "Then believe it." She squeezed his hands. "I am falling in love with you, Barrett Callahan. I did not plan for it to happen, and I know it complicates everything, but it is the truth." The smile that broke across his face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "I am falling in love with you too. I think I started the moment I saw you standing on that platform in chains, so proud and defiant even in the worst moment of your life." He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. Violet felt like she was coming home after a long journey, like she had found the place she was meant to be. When they finally broke apart, they were both smiling. "We should get out of these wet clothes," Barrett said, then immediately flushed. "I mean separately, in our own rooms." "Before we catch cold." Violet laughed at his flustered expression. "I know what you meant." That night, as she lay in bed listening to the rain pound on the roof, Violet felt happier than she had been in months. Yes, her situation was still complicated. She was still an indentured servant, still marked as a criminal, still at the mercy of forces beyond her control. But she had found something precious and unexpected in the midst of her troubles. She had found love. The next morning, Violet woke to find Barrett already up and making coffee. He looked up when she entered the kitchen, and his smile was shy and sweet. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." Violet felt suddenly awkward, unsure how to act after the intimacy of the previous evening. Barrett seemed to sense her uncertainty. He crossed the room and took her hands, lifting them to his lips and kissing her knuckles. "I am not sorry about last night, I want you to know that. I am not sorry either." "Good." He released her hands and poured her a cup of coffee. "Now I have been thinking. Your servitude is legally binding, but there might be a way to end it early." Violet's heart skipped a beat. "How?" "If I petition the court to release you on grounds of exemplary behavior and full restitution, they might agree. I could argue that you have worked diligently, caused no trouble, and that I am satisfied the debt to society has been paid. Would they really consider such a petition? I do not know, but it is worth trying. The judge might be Donnelly's relative, but even he has to uphold the law. If I can present a strong enough case, he would have a hard time refusing without looking corrupt. Donnelly would fight it. Let him fight. I am not afraid of Thomas Donnelly." Barrett's jaw set stubbornly. "You should not have to wait 3 years to be free, Violet. You never should have been in chains in the first place." Hope and fear warred in Violet's chest. "When would you file this petition?" "As soon as possible. I will ride to North Platte tomorrow and speak with a lawyer. It might take some time to prepare the case, but we will get started." True to his word, Barrett rode to town the next day. He was gone for hours, and Violet spent the time anxiously working in the garden, unable to settle to anything. When he finally returned in the late afternoon, she ran to meet him. "What did the lawyer say?" Barrett dismounted and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "He said it is possible, but it will not be easy. We need to document everything you have done here, every task completed, every day worked. We will need testimonials to your character from people in the community who are willing to speak for you, and we need to be prepared for Donnelly to make things as difficult as possible." "I expected nothing less," Violet said, "but if there is even a chance, we have to try." "We will try. I promise you, Violet, I will do everything in my power to win your freedom." Over the next several weeks, they worked tirelessly on building the case. Barrett kept meticulous records of Violet's work. Henry wrote a letter testifying to her good character and strong work ethic. They even managed to get a few of the neighboring ranchers to provide statements, though most were too afraid of angering Donnelly to get involved. During this time, Violet and Barrett's relationship continued to deepen. They stole moments together whenever they could, walking by the creek in the evenings, sitting close by the fire, sharing long conversations that lasted into the night. They were careful not to be improper, mindful of both Violet's reputation and the legal complications of their situation. But the love between them was undeniable, growing stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, Violet was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. She looked up to see 3 riders coming toward the ranch at a gallop. Her stomach dropped when she recognized Frank Morrison, Donnelly's hired man, along with 2 others she did not know. Barrett emerged from the barn, his hand instinctively going to the gun at his hip. "What do you want, Morrison?" "We are here on Mr. Donnelly's orders," Frank said. "He wants to see how his investment is doing, make sure the convicted criminal is being properly supervised." "She is being supervised just fine. Now leave." "Not until we have completed our inspection." Frank dismounted, and the other 2 men followed suit. "You have no right to be here," Barrett said, his voice hard. "We have every right. That woman is a criminal, and Mr. Donnelly has a civic duty to ensure she is not breaking any more laws." Violet felt anger rising in her chest. She was not going to cower before these men. She stepped forward, her chin held high. "I have broken no laws. I work hard, I cause no trouble, and I am fulfilling the terms of my servitude. Now please leave this ranch." Frank looked her up and down with obvious disdain. "You have got a mouth on you, do you not? Maybe Callahan here has not been keeping you in line properly." "Watch your mouth," Barrett growled. "Or what? You are going to shoot me, in front of witnesses." Frank laughed. "You are not that stupid, Callahan." "No, but I am willing to throw you off my land by force if necessary." The tension in the yard was thick enough to cut. Violet could see Barrett's muscles coiled, ready for a fight. The 3 men facing him looked equally prepared for violence. This was going to end badly if someone did not back down. "Gentlemen," a new voice called out. They all turned to see Henry riding into the yard, and he was not alone. Behind him were 3 other men, neighboring ranchers who were clearly armed and ready for trouble. "Afternoon, Barrett," one of the men said. "Henry came and told us you might be having some unwanted visitors. Thought we would ride over and make sure everything was all right." The odds had just shifted dramatically. Frank and his companions looked at each other uncertainly. "Everything is fine here," Barrett said calmly. "These men were just leaving." Frank scowled but remounted his horse. "Mr. Donnelly will hear about this. You tell Donnelly whatever you like, but tell him also that if he sends men to my property again, they will not get such a friendly reception." The 3 men rode off, and Violet sagged with relief. Barrett came to her side immediately. "Are you all right?" "Yes, thank you for standing up for me." The neighboring ranchers dismounted and came over. "We have been hearing things about what Donnelly did to you, Miss Greene," one of them said. "Some of us have been on the receiving end of his tactics ourselves. We figure it is time someone stood up to him." "Thank you," Violet said, touched by their support. "Your help means more than you know." After the ranchers left, Barrett held Violet close. "This is escalating. Donnelly is not going to give up." "I know, but neither will we." "No," Barrett agreed. Neither will we. The next few weeks were tense. Donnelly's men were seen watching the ranch from a distance, though they did not approach again. Barrett increased security, and he and Henry took turns keeping watch at night. Violet hated that her presence had brought this trouble to the ranch, but Barrett insisted he would not have it any other way. Finally, the lawyer sent word that the petition was ready to file. Barrett rode to North Platte to submit it to the court, and then all they could do was wait for the judge to set a hearing date. The wait was agonizing. Days turned into weeks with no word. Violet tried to stay busy, but it was hard not to obsess over every possible outcome. What if the judge refused to even consider the petition? What if Donnelly's influence was too strong? What if she was stuck in this legal limbo for the full 3 years? Barrett was her rock during this time, steady and reassuring even when she knew he must be worried too. He held her when she cried from frustration, made her laugh when the darkness threatened to overwhelm her, and never once made her feel like she was a burden. 2 months after the petition was filed, a notice finally arrived. The hearing was scheduled for the first week of October. Violet would have to return to North Platte to stand before the judge and plead her case. The morning of the hearing, Violet dressed with care in one of Barrett's mother's best dresses, a deep green that brought out the color of her eyes. Barrett wore his finest suit, and Henry came along for moral support. They rode to North Platte in Barrett's wagon, arriving at the courthouse just before 9 in the morning. The courtroom was packed. It seemed like half the town had turned out to watch the proceedings. Violet saw Donnelly sitting in the front row, his face smug and confident. Her stomach churned with nerves, but she forced herself to walk to the defendant's table with her head held high. The judge entered, and everyone stood. Judge Harlan was a thin, severe-looking man with sharp eyes and a tight mouth. He rapped his gavel and called the court to order. "We are here to consider a petition for early release from indentured servitude for Miss Violet Greene," he said. "Mr. Callahan, you filed this petition. Please present your case." Barrett stood, and Violet was struck by how commanding he looked, how confident. "Your Honor, I purchased Miss Greene's servitude 2.5 months ago. In that time, she has proven herself to be hardworking, honest, and completely rehabilitated, if indeed she ever needed rehabilitation in the first place. She has fulfilled every task assigned to her with diligence and skill. She has caused no trouble, broken no laws, and become a valued member of my household. I have documented all of her work, and I have letters from others testifying to her good character." He presented the documents to the judge, who reviewed them with an impassive expression. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Barrett continued, "I believe that Miss Greene was wrongly convicted. I believe she was framed for a crime she did not commit, and that her continued servitude is a miscarriage of justice." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Donnelly half rose from his seat, his face turning red. "Those are serious accusations, Mr. Callahan," the judge said sharply. "I am aware, Your Honor, but I am prepared to stand by them. Do you have proof of these claims? Not concrete proof, no. But I ask the court to consider the circumstances. Miss Greene had no history of criminal behavior. She had no motive to steal horses. She stood to lose everything by committing such a crime. Meanwhile, the man who accused her had a clear motive to see her convicted. He wanted her land, and when she refused to sell, he found another way to take it from her." "That is slander," Donnelly shouted, jumping to his feet. "I will not sit here and listen to such lies." "Sit down, Mr. Donnelly," the judge said. "You will have your chance to speak." Donnelly sat, but he looked furious. The judge turned his attention to Violet. "Miss Greene, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Violet stood on shaking legs. Your Honor, I swear on everything I hold sacred that I did not steal those horses. I do not know how they ended up in my barn, but I did not put them there. I have tried to be a good person, to live honestly and work hard. I do not deserve to be punished for a crime I did not commit. Mr. Callahan has given me a second chance, and I have tried to prove myself worthy of it. I am asking this court to recognize that and grant me my freedom." The judge studied her for a long moment. "Mr. Donnelly, you may speak now." Donnelly stood, smoothing down his vest. "Your Honor, this is absurd. The woman was caught red-handed with stolen property. The law is clear. She must serve out her full term of servitude. Mr. Callahan has been taken in by a pretty face and a sad story, but that does not change the facts. She is a convicted criminal, and she should be treated as such." "And what about the accusations that you framed her?" the judge asked. "Preposterous. I am a respected member of this community. I have no reason to lie or to falsely accuse anyone. Mr. Callahan is simply trying to manipulate the system because he has developed an inappropriate attachment to his servant." Violet felt her face flush, but she kept her composure. The judge was quiet for a long time, reviewing the documents before him. The courtroom held its collective breath. Finally, he looked up. "I have reviewed the evidence presented, and I have listened to the arguments from both sides. While I cannot make a ruling on Miss Greene's guilt or innocence, that is not what we are here to determine today. The question before me is whether she has fulfilled her obligations sufficiently to warrant early release from servitude." He paused, and Violet's heart hammered in her chest. "Based on the documentation provided and the testimonials submitted, I find that Miss Greene has indeed demonstrated exemplary behavior and has worked diligently to repay her debt to society. Therefore, I am granting the petition for early release. Miss Violet Greene, you are hereby released from your term of indentured servitude, effective immediately." The gavel came down, and for a moment Violet could not process what she had just heard. Then it hit her like a wave. She was free. Actually, truly free. She turned to Barrett, and he was grinning from ear to ear. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around right there in the courtroom. People were clapping and cheering, and even Judge Harlan cracked a small smile before calling for order. Donnelly stormed out of the courtroom, his face purple with rage. Violet did not care. For the first time in months, she felt light, unburdened, like she could finally breathe again. Outside the courthouse, Barrett took both her hands in his. "You are free, Violet. Truly free." "Thanks to you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I will never be able to repay you for what you have done for me. You do not need to repay me. You being happy is all the payment I need." He hesitated, then said, "Violet, I know this changes things between us. You are free now. You can go anywhere, do anything. You are not tied to the ranch anymore." Violet understood what he was really saying. He was giving her an out, a chance to leave if she wanted to. But she knew with absolute certainty that leaving was the last thing she wanted. "Barrett Callahan, I am in love with you. That has not changed just because a judge signed some papers. If anything, it makes it more real because now I know my feelings are completely my own, untainted by any obligation. So I am asking you, right here in front of the courthouse and half the town, will you let me stay? Will you let me be part of your life, not as a servant, but as an equal, as a partner?" Barrett looked like he might burst from happiness. "Violet Greene, I would be honored. But I have to ask you something first." He dropped to one knee right there on the courthouse steps, and Violet gasped. "I am doing this all backward, I know. I should court you properly, give you time to be sure of your feelings. But I have never been good at waiting for the things I want, and I want you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to build a life with you, raise children with you, grow old with you. Violet, will you marry me? Violet did not hesitate. Yes. Yes, of course I will marry you. Barrett stood and kissed her thoroughly, to the applause and hoots of the gathered crowd. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, Henry clapped Barrett on the shoulder. "About time you got around to that," the older man said with a grin. "I was starting to think you were going to make me do it for you." They returned to the ranch that evening in high spirits. Violet felt like she was floating. Everything seemed brighter and more beautiful than it had just that morning. She was free, she was in love, and she was going to marry the man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the little church in North Platte. It was a small ceremony, attended by Henry, a few neighboring ranchers, and some of the townspeople who had supported Violet during her trial. The minister kept the service simple and heartfelt. Violet wore a cream-colored dress that had belonged to Barrett's mother, altered to fit her perfectly. Barrett wore his suit and looked so handsome that Violet's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar. When he took her hands and spoke his vows, his voice was strong and sure, promising to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life. When it was Violet's turn, she spoke from her heart. "Barrett, you gave me back my freedom when I had lost all hope. You believed in me when no one else would. You showed me what true goodness looks like. I promise to love you, to stand by you, to build a life with you that honors the gift you have given me. I am yours, today and always." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Barrett kissed her with such tenderness that Violet felt tears slip down her cheeks. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, husband and wife, ready to face whatever the future held together. The celebration at the ranch afterward was joyous. Henry had prepared a feast, and the neighbors brought food and drink to share. There was music and dancing, and Violet felt surrounded by warmth and goodwill. Even some of the people who had shunned her after her conviction came to offer their congratulations and apologies. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, Barrett pulled Violet aside. "Are you happy?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," she said honestly. "Good." He kissed her forehead. "Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." That night, they came together as husband and wife in the bedroom that had once been Violet's but was now theirs to share. Barrett was gentle and patient, taking his time to learn what pleased her, worshiping her body with his hands and mouth, until Violet was trembling with need. When they finally joined together, it felt like the culmination of everything they had been building toward since the day he bought her freedom. It was not just physical pleasure, though there was plenty of that. It was connection, intimacy, the merging of two souls into one. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, both sated and content. Violet rested her head on Barrett's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she murmured. "I love you too," he replied, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this life. There was never any other choice. You are my home, Barrett." The months that followed were some of the happiest of Violet's life. She and Barrett settled into married life with ease, their partnership extending from the bedroom to every aspect of running the ranch. Violet worked alongside Barrett and Henry, proving herself to be just as capable with cattle and horses as she was in the kitchen. She had a natural way with animals, and Barrett often said she had magic in her hands. Winter came, blanketing the prairie in snow, and Violet discovered she loved the ranch in all its seasons. She loved the cozy evenings by the fire with Barrett, the way the world seemed to quiet down under the weight of snow, the stark beauty of the frozen landscape. In the spring, Violet planted an ambitious garden, determined to have fresh vegetables all summer. She also started raising more chickens and even talked Barrett into getting a milk cow. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts, and by summer, they were able to expand their herd. It was in late July when Violet realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she tried not to get her hopes up, but as the days passed and other signs appeared, she could no longer deny it. She was pregnant. She told Barrett one evening after dinner, pulling him aside to the creek where they often walked together. "I have something to tell you," she said, unable to keep the smile off her face. "What is it?" Barrett asked, looking curious. "We are going to have a baby. I am pregnant." For a moment, Barrett just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby, Violet, that is incredible. We are going to be parents." "Yes, we are," she said, laughing with him. "Are you happy?" "Happy? I am beyond happy. I am ecstatic. I am the luckiest man alive." He set her down gently, then placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I cannot wait to meet you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Violet felt healthy and strong, though she got tired more easily as she grew bigger. Barrett was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying that she was working too hard or not resting enough. Violet found his concern endearing, even when it was a bit much. In late March of 1879, on a cool spring morning, Violet went into labor. The doctor from town had been summoned days earlier to wait at the ranch, and Henry paced nervously outside the bedroom while Barrett held Violet's hand through every contraction. The labor was long and difficult, but Violet was strong. After nearly 12 hours, with Barrett by her side encouraging her and the doctor coaching her through, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Barrett wept when he held his son for the first time, this tiny, perfect creature with a shock of dark hair and his mother's delicate features. "He is beautiful," he whispered, "just like you." They named him William Henry Callahan, after Barrett's father and their dear friend Henry. Will, as they called him, was a good baby, quiet and content. He had Barrett's gray eyes and Violet's dark hair, and both his parents adored him completely. Life on the ranch took on a new rhythm with a baby in the house. Violet found ways to work with Will strapped to her back, and Barrett was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son. Henry became Uncle Henry, doting on the baby and carving him toys from wood. When Will was 6 months old, they received word that Thomas Donnelly had died suddenly of a heart attack. Violet felt no joy at the news, only a sense of relief that the man who had caused her so much pain was no longer a threat. His death seemed to close that chapter of her life for good. The ranch continued to thrive. Barrett and Violet worked hard, but they also made sure to take time to enjoy their life together. They went on family picnics by the creek, taught Will to ride when he was old enough, and hosted gatherings for their neighbors. The Broken Creek Ranch became known as a place of warmth and hospitality. 3 years after Will was born, Violet gave birth to twin girls, Emma Rose and Sarah Jane. The births were easier than Will's had been, and both girls came into the world healthy and squalling. Barrett was beside himself with joy, declaring himself the luckiest man in Nebraska to have 3 beautiful children. The twins were a handful, energetic and curious, always getting into mischief. But they brought so much laughter and love to the household that no one minded the extra work. Will took his role as big brother seriously, watching over his sisters with the same protective nature his father displayed. As the years passed, Violet sometimes reflected on the unlikely path that had brought her to this life. She had been arrested, convicted, sold into servitude, and yet out of that darkness had come the greatest blessings she could have imagined. She had found love with a man who cherished her, built a family that filled her heart to bursting, and created a home where she belonged. One evening, when Will was 10 and the twins were 7, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. The children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm summer breeze. Barrett sat beside Violet on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "The path that brought you here," Violet thought for a moment. "I regret the injustice of what Donnelly did, and I wish my parents had lived to see their grandchildren, but regret the rest? Never. Every moment of pain led me to you, to this life, to our children. How could I regret that?" "I think about that day at the auction sometimes," Barrett admitted. "I almost did not go. Henry needed supplies and I was going to send him to town instead, but something made me go myself." "I believe it was fate, Violet. We were meant to find each other." "I believe that too." Violet leaned against him, content. "You told me that day that forgiveness starts now. You gave me permission to let go of my anger and bitterness, to start fresh. That was the greatest gift you could have given me, even more valuable than my freedom. You gave me gifts too. You made this house a home. You gave me children, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You made me a better man." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Will was teaching the twins to rope a fence post, demonstrating with the patience and care he had learned from his father. Emma and Sarah were concentrating fiercely, their little faces scrunched up in determination. "Papa," Sarah called out, "look, I did it." Barrett stood and walked over to admire her work, praising her effort generously. Emma insisted on showing him hers too, not to be outdone by her sister. Will stood back, grinning proudly at his student's success. Violet watched her family, her heart full to bursting. This was happiness, she thought. This was everything she had never dared to dream of during those dark days in chains. This was the life that forgiveness and love had built. Henry came around from the barn, walking a bit more slowly than he used to. He was getting older, his hair now completely gray, but he was still sharp and capable. "Dinner ready soon," he called out. "Almost," Violet called back. "Another 20 minutes, good, I am starving." Henry joined Barrett and the children, and soon they were all laughing at something Will had said. Violet stood and went inside to finish preparing the meal. The kitchen was warm and smelled of roasting chicken and fresh bread. She moved around the familiar space, this room where she had cooked her first meal as Barrett's servant and countless meals since as his wife. So much had changed, and yet the important things remained constant. Love, family, home. She was taking the bread from the oven when Barrett came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and kissing her neck. "The children want to sleep outside tonight. Can we put up tents in the yard?" "In the yard? Really? They say it is an adventure." Barrett grinned. "I remember doing the same thing when I was Will's age. It felt like the greatest expedition in the world, even though I was only 50 feet from the house." "All right, but you are the one staying out there with them if they get scared in the middle of the night. Deal?" He kissed her again, this time on the lips. "Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 times. You are slacking." "I love you, Violet Callahan. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too, Barrett. Always." They called the family in for dinner, and everyone gathered around the big table Barrett had built when the twins were born. They held hands and said grace, thanking the Lord for their blessings. Then they ate and talked and laughed, the conversation flowing freely. After dinner, Barrett and Will set up 2 tents in the yard while the twins gathered blankets and pillows. Violet packed a basket of cookies and milk for their adventure. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the family settled in for their backyard camping trip. Violet and Barrett retired to their bedroom. leaving the window open so they could hear if the children needed them. They lay together in their bed, Barrett's arm around Violet, her head on his chest. "They will be fine," Barrett murmured. "Will is responsible and Henry is in the barn if they need help. I know. I just like having them close. Me too." He was quiet for a moment. "Violet, there is something I have been thinking about. The ranch is doing well, better than I ever imagined. I have been thinking about buying more land, expanding our operation. Maybe one day we will take over if he wants to. And the twins, they can have their share too. I want to build something lasting, something we can pass down to our children and their children." "I think that is a wonderful dream," Violet said, "and I believe we can make it happen. We have built so much already. Why stop now? Why stop now indeed?" Barrett tightened his arm around her. "You know, sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life. That you are my wife, that those amazing children out there in the yard are ours. It seems too good to be true." "It is true, though. It is real. We made this life together, Barrett. We took something broken and painful and transformed it into something beautiful. That is the power of forgiveness, of love, of second chances. Forgiveness starts now." Barrett repeated the words he had said to her so long ago. "Best words I ever spoke. Best words I ever heard." They fell asleep holding each other, secure in their love and in the life they had built. Outside, their children whispered and giggled in their tents, making memories that would last a lifetime. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, a place of safety and happiness. Years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, joys and sorrows. Will grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch and eventually courting a girl from a neighboring homestead. The twins grew into beautiful, spirited young women who kept their parents on their toes with their adventures and ambitions. Barrett and Violet grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced droughts and hard winters, celebrated good harvests and the births of grandchildren. Through it all, they remained partners in every sense of the word, facing life's trials together and savoring its joys. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Barrett surprised Violet with a gift. He led her out to the creek where he had proposed all those years ago. There, carved into the trunk of the largest cottonwood tree, were their initials inside a heart, along with the date of their wedding, and the words "Forgiveness starts now." Violet traced the carving with her fingers, tears streaming down her face. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "No, you are perfect. You are my miracle, Violet. You came into my life in chains and you set me free. You gave me love, family, purpose, everything that matters. I would do it all again 1,000 times just to have you by my side." "And I would choose you every time," Violet said. "Through every hardship, every trial, every moment of pain, I would choose you." They stood by the creek as they had so many times before, watching the water flow past, eternal and unchanging. The ranch spread out behind them, a testament to their hard work and dedication. Their family was inside the house, 3 generations now, all connected by the love that Barrett and Violet had built. It had started with chains and injustice, with pain and loss. But it had become something beautiful beyond measure. Barrett had bought Violet's freedom, but in doing so, he had freed them both. Together, they had built a life of love, forgiveness, and endless possibility. As the sun set on another day at the Broken Creek Ranch, Barrett and Violet walked hand in hand back to the house. Their children and grandchildren waited inside, ready to celebrate the anniversary of the day 2 souls had joined together in love. The past was behind them, forgiven and released. The future stretched ahead, bright with promise. And in that moment, standing together on the land they loved, surrounded by the family they had created, Barrett and Violet Callahan knew that they had found something rare and precious. They had found forever in each other's arms, and that was the greatest treasure of all.